Jake Lee, a wealthy man in his late 60s, sat alone in his black Mercedes, tapping his thumb impatiently on the steering wheel. The hum of the air conditioner barely managed to cut through the oppressive heat of Kentucky. Retired from a prosperous career in finance, Jake was accustomed to having things go his way. Yet today, he found himself stranded with a flat tire, far from the comforts of his luxurious mansion on the edge of town. After several failed attempts to contact roadside assistance, he let out a deep sigh, accepting the fact that he would have to wait. Just as he began to feel frustration building up, he noticed a figure walking toward him. A young boy, likely around 13 or 14, dressed in a faded t-shirt and worn sneakers, approached with a focused expression. Jake observed as the boy examined the car before offering a polite but assured nod. "Got a flat, sir?" the boy asked, his voice calm. "Yes, I do," Jake answered. Jake felt an odd mix of relief and discomfort. "I was hoping for some help," he admitted. "But my phone's got no signal out here." The boy flashed a small smile. "I can help with that," he said, dropping to his knees beside the tire without a second thought. "My grandpa showed me how to change a tire last summer. Do you have a spare?" Jake motioned to the trunk. The boy opened it and quickly retrieved the necessary tools. With surprising speed, the young boy worked, his hands moving with a calm confidence that seemed well beyond his age. As Jake watched him, a sense of humility washed over him, something he had not felt in years. He considered offering the boy something in return, but the boy remained focused on his task, barely looking up. A few minutes later, the boy stood, wiped his hands on his jeans, and said, "All done." Jake gave a small, satisfied smile and reached into his wallet, pulling out a few bills and offering them to the boy. "Here, take this. I really appreciate your help." But the boy stepped back, raising his hand in a polite refusal. "Thank you, sir, but I don't need anything. I'm just happy to help." Stunned, Jake stood there, money still in hand, as he watched the boy turn and walk away down the road. The encounter left him unexpectedly moved, though he could not quite figure out why. Left alone, he put the money back in his wallet and climbed into his car. As he drove off, he glanced in the rearview mirror, watching the boy's figure shrink into the distance. Throughout the rest of his drive, Jake's thoughts kept returning to the boy. There was a quiet dignity and self-assurance about him, not rooted in money or privilege, but in something far deeper. That night, as Jake sat alone in his lavish home, he could not shake the image of the boy walking away with nothing but a smile. Later, in the quiet of his study, Jake sank into the leather armchair surrounded by books he rarely touched. The room was still, the only sound coming from the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. His perfectly prepared dinner, a steak and asparagus, sat untouched on the side table. But his mind was consumed with thoughts of the boy. Over his lifetime, Jake had met thousands of people, business partners, employees, investors. Most of his interactions were cantered around deals, favors, and negotiations. There was always something exchanged, a price or an expectation. But the boy had helped him without asking for anything in return, simply out of kindness. Leaning back, Jake took a sip of his scotch, the memory of the boy's confident smile replaying in his mind. The boy did not seem like someone who had much. Worn shoes, faded clothes, dirt on his hands. Yet he carried himself with a rare kind of integrity. The next morning, Jake could not resist the urge to find the boy. He did not know why, but something inside him felt unresolved. Maybe it was guilt, gratitude, or just curiosity. Whatever the reason was, Jake found himself driving down the same stretch of road, scanning the horizon for any sign of the boy. Hours passed as he stopped at gas stations and small diners, asking anyone he could find if they had seen a young boy matching the description. Most people shrugged or shook their heads, until finally, an older woman behind the counter of a small cafe spoke up. "Sounds like you're talking about Mike," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "That boy's always helping folks around here. Lives with his mama over in Harlan." "Harlan," Jake repeated, making a mental note. Thank you. Harlan was an hour away, tucked in the foothills of the Appalachians. The drive was scenic, but Jake barely noticed, his mind consumed with questions. What kind of life did this boy have? What kind of family raised someone like him? When he arrived in Harlan, the town was quiet, with modest homes and small businesses lining the streets. He asked a few locals about Mike and was eventually directed to a small house on the edge of town. The house was worn but well kept, its front porch sagging slightly under its own weight. Jake parked his car and hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to say. Taking a deep breath, he knocked on the door. It opened moments later, revealing a woman in her early 40s. She looked tired but kind, her sharp, curious eyes sizing him up. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Good morning," Jake replied. Clearing his throat, Jake spoke. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I believe I met your son yesterday. Mike, right? He helped me with a flat tire." Her expression softened immediately. "That sounds like my Mike," she said with a small smile. "He's always helping folks." "I just wanted to thank him properly," Jake explained. "He wouldn't accept anything from me yesterday." She nodded and stepped aside to let him in. "He's out back. You're welcome to wait." Jake stepped inside, taking in the modest surroundings. The furniture was old but clean, the walls decorated with family photos and a few hand-drawn pictures that seemed to be from a much younger Mike. It was a far cry from his own home with its sleek surfaces and expensive artwork. Yet something about this space felt warmer, more alive. He followed her out to the backyard where Mike was repairing the fence. The boy looked up, surprised to see Jake. "Hey, mister," Mike said, wiping his hands on his jeans. "What are you doing here?" Jake smiled, feeling unexpectedly nervous. "I wanted to thank you again. You helped me when I really needed it, and I just couldn't stop thinking about it." Mike shrugged, his expression casual and sincere. It wasn't a big deal. But to Jake, it was, and he was determined to show it. Mike leaned against the fence, his curious gaze fixed on Jake. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The boy's calm demeanor made Jake feel slightly out of place, as though he were the one being judged. "I don't think you realize what a big deal it was," Jake finally said, breaking the silence. "People don't usually help strangers without expecting something in return." Mike tilted his head slightly. Mike seemed puzzled by Jake's statement. "I don't see it like that," he replied. "If someone needs help and I can do it, why wouldn't I?" Jake was struck by the simplicity of the boy's logic. He looked past Mike at the yard, where the fence was patched with mismatched wood, the grass sparse and uneven, and an old swing set leaned precariously with rusted, broken chains. It was clear that Mike's family didn't have much, but they made do with what they had. "You've got a good head on your shoulders," Jake said, genuinely impressed. "Your mother must be proud." Mike grinned and glanced back toward the house. "She works hard. I just try to help out where I can." Jake was quiet for a moment, reflecting on the boy's words. He thought of his own childhood, growing up in a home much like this one. His parents had worked tirelessly to make ends meet, teaching him the value of hard work and perseverance. Over the years, he had drifted away from those lessons, consumed by the pursuit of wealth and status. Standing in this yard now, he felt an odd mix of nostalgia and regret. "I'd like to do something for you and your family," Jake said at last. Mike straightened up, his expression cautious. "We're okay, mister. We don't need anything." "It's not about need," Jake insisted. "It's about what's right. You helped me, and I'd like to return the favor." Before Mike could respond, just then, Mike's mother stepped out onto the porch, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Mike, you better come inside and wash up before lunch," she called. Then her gaze shifted to Jake. "Would you care to join us?" "It's nothing fancy, but you're welcome." Jake hesitated, not used to such an invitation, but the sincerity in her voice left no room for excuses. "I'd like that," he said, following her into the house. Inside, the kitchen smelled of freshly baked bread and roasted vegetables. The table was small, surrounded by mismatched chairs, but it was set with care. Jake sat down, feeling out of place in his tailored suit amid the humble surroundings. Mike washed his hands at the sink and joined them, his easy smile never fading. As they ate, Jake found himself drawn into their conversation. Mike talked about his school, his friends, and his dream of becoming an engineer. His mother shared stories about the community, speaking with quiet pride about the people who looked out for each other. Jake listened intently, feeling a warmth he had not felt in years. For all his wealth and success, his own home felt cold and empty compared to this modest house, full of laughter and genuine connection. After lunch, as they cleared the table, Jake turned to Mike's mother. "You've done a remarkable job raising him," he said. "He's got more heart than most people I know," Jake said. Mike's mother smiled, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you. He's a good boy, but we have had our struggles. We've learned to appreciate the small things." Jake nodded, his mind already racing with ideas. He did not want to overstep, but he could not leave without doing something for them. This family had given him a gift he had not even realized he needed, a reminder of what truly mattered. That afternoon, as Jake left their home, he felt a sense of clarity he had not experienced in years. Driving back to his estate, he began to plan. This was not about charity. It was about honoring the boy's selflessness and the family's resilience. Mike and his mother deserved more than patched fences and worn furniture. They deserved stability and recognition for the strength they showed every day. The next morning, Jake made calls. Lots of them. He reached out to old colleagues, contractors, and suppliers. By midday, a plan was in motion. Within a week, trucks and workers began arriving at Mike's home. Jake stood on the sidewalk, clipboard in hand, directing the renovations as Mike and his mother watched in stunned silence. "You didn't have to do this," Mike's mother said, her voice trembling as she saw the crew unloading supplies. "We've managed fine on our own." Jake turned to her, his expression sincere. "You've done more than manage. You've thrived. But you gave me something I did not know I was missing. Let me give back." Mike was quieter than usual, standing beside his mother with a thoughtful look on his face. Jake knelt slightly to meet his eye. "You taught me something, Mike. Helping people is not about money. It is about showing up. I want to show up for you." Over the next several weeks, the house underwent a complete transformation. The sagging porch was replaced with sturdy wood, the roof was repaired, and the rusty swing set out back was swapped for a new one. Inside, the walls were freshly painted, the floors polished, and the kitchen upgraded with modern appliances. At first, Mike tried to help with the renovations, carrying planks and sweeping debris, but Jake insisted he take a break. "Your job," Jake said with a smile, "is to enjoy being a kid for a little while." Still, Mike could not resist sneaking out to watch the crew work. His eyes lit up with curiosity as he observed them measure, cut, and build. One of the workers, a burly man named Joe, noticed Mike's interest and invited him to help measure wood planks. Before long, Mike was asking questions about tools and construction, his excitement contagious. Jake watched from a distance, feeling a warm pride swelling in his chest. For the first time in years, he felt like he was doing something meaningful, something beyond himself. The boy's energy reminded him of the ambition he once had, before life became a blur of boardrooms and stock portfolios. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the project neared completion, the family stood on the porch, marveling at the transformation. Mike's mother turned to Jake, her voice choked with emotion. "This isn't just a house anymore. It is a home. I don't know how we can ever thank you." Jake shook his head, his tone soft. "You already have. You reminded me of what life is supposed to be about: family, connection, and purpose. I think I'm the one who should be thanking you. The final day of the renovation felt like a celebration. Neighbors stopped by to see the changes, offering smiles and small gifts, fresh baked bread, jars of homemade jam, and even a potted plant. Mike's laughter echoed through the yard as he raced around, showing his friends the new swing set and freshly painted rooms. Inside, the house, once tired and worn, now radiated life. Jake stood on the front porch, leaning against the sturdy new railing, watching the scene unfold. He hadn't felt this kind of joy in years. Simple, unfiltered joy that came from seeing others thrive. Mike's mother walked over, a cup of iced tea in her hand, and offered it to him with a smile. "You've done more than fix a house," she said softly. "You've given us hope, and I think you've found something for yourself, too." Jake nodded, taking a sip. "I have," he admitted. "I spent so many years chasing things I thought mattered. Money, status, influence. But none of it feels like this. None of it ever filled me the way this has." As the sun began to set, Mike joined them on the porch, still full of energy. He looked at Jake, his expression thoughtful. "Mr. Jake," he began, "I've been thinking a lot about what you did for us. I want to do something like that one day. I want to help people too." Jake placed a hand on Mike's shoulder, his voice steady. "You already are, Mike. Your kindness set all of this in motion. Don't ever lose that." The three of them sat together, watching the sky shift from gold to deep orange. The warmth of the day lingered, but there was a deeper warmth, one that came from connection, gratitude, and a shared sense of purpose. When it was time for Jake to leave, Mike and his mother walked him to his car. The boy's wide grin and his mother's tearful smile were etched into Jake's memory as he drove away. He realized that this was not the end. It was just the beginning of a new chapter in all their lives. The weeks that followed brought more changes. Mike's newfound curiosity about construction blossomed into a passion. Jake arranged for him to spend time shadowing the workers who had helped renovate the house. Mike soaked up every bit of knowledge, eager to learn. Jake, in turn, found himself drawn back to Harlan again and again. Each visit felt less like a trip and more like a return home. He no longer felt like an outsider in their lives. He was part of something bigger now. And for the first time in years, he was content. The story ended where it had begun, in a small town with a big heart, where one act of kindness from a young boy reminded an old man of life's greatest lesson. It is not about what you have, but what you give.